The phone stopped ringing. He waited for a voicemail notification. Nothing ever chimed. He was free to take in the first hangover he'd had in quite some time. There had been a few nights with a few drinks, followed by mornings with a little dry mouth and a migraine, but this was the inferno he'd been missing out on for a while. The entire right side of his head was like an 808 bumping with a perfect tempo that made him want to submerge his whole head in ice water. Forget dry mouth. His lungs felt like a windy street corner in Joshua Tree in July. His heart was thumping so hard he could hear his belt buckle rattling. He found an old bottle of Norco from when he broke his wrist cycling down Cherry Canyon too fast on a foggy morning. He crushed one pill with 2 Advil and chugged an orange Gatorade. Costello knew he had to pay the piper in order to play this game. His hangover regimen was pretty simple, but it got the job done, especially if he caught just a little bit more sleep. Costello woke up hungry as hell just after 11 a.m. He didn't realize how long it had been since he'd taken time away from work. More important, he'd forgotten about his Peruvian meals or a slice of pizza at 4 a.m. on most nights. It gave his universe the distance it needed to measure space and time appropriately. His entire universe started feeling extremely heavy, almost as though he had been ignoring himself the entire time he was working to heal himself. It felt powerfully ironic, but also rather clear because he knew immediately what he was doing was for a societal good rather than a personal good. Sadly, all along with what was good for Costello were the things that could destroy him. It brought him back to his theory about how parents have a responsibility to wash away any evil from their child and teach them what the world has indoctrinated for people as good. They do this all while the child has to figure out for themselves how they feel about the evil inside of them. Costello realized all of existence was performing history's largest science project with a plurality of people who aren't scientists. Costello had a sudden urge to start looking at old photographs. It was almost as though he felt he may die sometime in the near future and needed to take in old memories to build himself up in preparation for his exit. He never really thought much about death. He didn't have any unusual deaths in his family, where a mother or a father or close uncle, brother or sister passed sooner than anyone expected. He had a blip in time when his cardiologist told him about his ventricular tract disorder, but then he later learned it was something he would have to accept. Just another crisis of the existential criteria that bounced around his brain, making him wonder whether it was better to be dead or live in fear of death. His cardiac issues took away the one thing that he desired most in life, so it forced him to come to terms with finding other reasons to appreciate this matrix. He tore through his bookshelf looking for photo albums his mother gave him when they last visited New Hampshire. He got a good chuckle remembering how ridiculous he thought her giving him these photo albums was, but now it all made sense. He thought about all the photos on electronic devices thrown in drawers and scattered throughout boxes he'd probably never find. This came to a boil with him because it made him feel like the current evolution of human existence was wiping away tangible objects that have maintained history. It felt like a transition into an epoch that he may not care to be a participant. As he flipped through these old 35mm photographs, he noticed his dad routinely with his hands wrapped around a can of beer and a big shit-eating grin on his face. It made Costello proud to know how seriously he himself had taken his cycling. His dad talked about cycling often and made it seem like it was a much bigger part of his life. The more Costello rushed through these photo albums, he struggled to find one image of him with a bicycle. He slowed down and started to analyze the photos deeper. He wondered if his mom gave him these photo albums to be nostalgic or was it to show him the truth. He looked at the images and behaviors of his mother in comparison to his father and brought it all to the surface, analyzing who he was. Costello started to see through decades of fog, and for the first time, he was seeing much clearer. The clarity was helping him see why he was exactly who he was. Being that run-of-the-mill kid growing up, he would spend time observing the other kids around him. He watched their personalities, examined their demeanors, and at times tilted his head, wondering why they made the choices they made. He just never thought it was his place to tell anybody how he thought they should behave or respond in societal situations. This adjudication was based on an assessment he made that their parents, if they had any, either provided some sort of discipline or enabled them to grow up much differently than what he felt was appropriate. Here is where he entered into this vicious circle of thought that plagued his mind. What is appropriate? He knew what felt right to him, and he saw how other people reacted to him. Costello never found himself in any type of legal trouble. He never had a desire to hurt anyone. He always found himself wanting to be the arbiter of truth or as helpful to others as often as he could. Problem was, he often found himself alone. He wasn't close with his family, other than Grans. He rarely opened up about himself to others, except with Jenna. There just never was any type of deity to come down and validate Costello for the way he lived his life. So who knew if a single thing he'd ever done was right or wrong? Maybe that's why this team of spectral house guests have been sent to spend time with Costello. Maybe they or some sort of pantheon coalescing in Costello's simulation were there to answer more than what happened to Tal and Spencer in Seattle. Costello opened one of the photo albums and peeled back the adhesive cellophane holding the photos down. He couldn't keep his eyes off of a photo of him and Grans, so he decided to keep it with him tonight as a memento. Costello knew he had a while to go before he would have a seat at the table with the entire pantheon, but he had a feeling there was a chance he might have one visitor tonight. He couldn't figure out why, but carrying that photo felt a bit like a totem he could use to keep himself grounded. He wasn't quite ready to jump in with both feet and find all the answers he needed to find.